All right, and welcome back after a long hiatus. We're here with myself, Thomas and Commish.
Welcome back, everyone. Been a while. It's time to recap a full season. Week 14 just wrapped up.
It did, and we are shortly or very soon going to be headed into playoffs. Like Commish said, I think we'll start off. It was a fun year. It flew by. I honestly can't believe that it's already, coming to an end, unfortunately. But the three things that we were going to cover in this was our biggest surprise, the trade deadline that just went through, and then finally cap it off with our power rankings for the final six teams that happened to make it to the playoffs. And you're looking at two teams that did make it in.
Yeah, we made the cut this time. Going into the end of September was the last time we talked. Well, it's flown by. We also haven't talked at all. Since that date, a few things have shaken up. What would you say is your biggest surprise after 14 weeks here?
I think for me, the biggest surprise was the drop off in Cody's team. I feel like with the last time we talked, we both had him in that tier where he was, just outside of the like main top guys, but right in contention for playoffs. And back then I thought his roster has definitely changed a lot. He's made a lot of trades over the year. But by the end of the season, I was really surprised to see him kind of having a tough time cracking 100 points or just kind of going above that. I thought going into the year, Cody's team could be a relatively, not maybe per se a powerhouse, but a team that I thought going in would almost be a lock for the playoffs.
Fair. And what you see here doesn't represent the Lamar Jackson being on the team. And most people who own Lamar Jackson this year, they understand how painful that had been. Bijan obviously not performing the way intended. Those are two guys I have in my other league. So big shout out there to those guys being bums late in the season. I do
And
think
Jefferson, yeah, sorry.
No, early on, I do think that he had a good run with Javante and some other guys. So it was surprising to see it fall apart quick.
Yeah, and he was it was the same thing as last year where he was that beneficiary of wide receivers getting hurt and your tight end picking up that slack. Ferguson had like 3 or 4 games, basically averaging like anywhere from like 20 to 25. And then CD came back and started taking away some of those receptions. But, on the other hand, too, like there wasn't much he could do. I couldn't believe Jefferson's year this year. I thought he was QB proof where, like, even with a bad QB, he'd give you 13 to 15 a game. But yeah, for a guy of his caliber, I just couldn't believe his season this year. I mean, I think he has a big bounce back next year, but Jefferson didn't play well for him. Lamar didn't play well for him, like just not a Lamar caliber year. He was injured. And then he just had other injuries as well with like McLaurin and a few other guys. But for me, that was kind of my biggest surprise. I thought Cody had a really good chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think that would have been surprising to some, but for me, Cody was always kind of in that middle of the pack and needed something to hit strong for him to do well. Last year surprised me more than this year. For him to be in the championship game, that surprised me. Whereas this year, an injury or two did happen, a low performer or two did happen. He traded away Mahomes. So he had some obstacles to overcome, and it didn't come together. My biggest surprise this year was the size of the middle of the pack. We went into week 14 and our schedule was deadlocked where we had anyone that wasn't our bottom two here had a chance. And for that deadlock to really be 8 teams, obviously the top was the top, they were going to get in. But coming down into week 13, we still didn't know the buys. Week 14, we still didn't know the playoff teams. So I had a blast with that. Even Cody, who you just mentioned, if he had a 200-point output, which we had seen him do a year ago, he could have made the cut. And that size of the middle of the pack, I think created some trade difficulty, created an exciting waiver wire. It made people who were sellers and buyers have just one little emotional impulse might push them to one side of the fence or the other. So I found that very exciting. It forced me to kind of stick it out with a team that I thought was a little bit of a rebuild or young team, not quite a contender. So I was excited to make the cut and ultimately now be the 3 seed going into the playoffs, which seems insane to me.
Yeah, very strong finish by you. I know we're going to get into it, but I thought you won the trade deadline for sure. But to your point that you were talking about, I think you hit the nail on the head there with so many teams were still in contention that rarely anyone wanted to be a seller. And so like people like right around that deadline when maybe you wanted to go out like I was someone who wanted to go out and grab one more guy for my roster, but there really was limited options of players that you could buy or teams that were willing to sell because so many teams were fighting for either that final playoff spot or they're right in contention themselves and they don't want to take a hit, which I didn't blame anyone for. I think that's why you didn't see as many trades this year at the deadlines, but the trades that you did see were all huge splashes.
Agreed. I think the trades that could have been, a lot of people were kind of forced out of because nobody wanted these 2026 firsts. And then you look at the rest of the guys on the block, it's like, who thinks that Nico's going to stay healthy? Stafford has 5 more years. Like, Sutton is going to be a real contributor. McLaurin's going to continue his last year's boom after injuries this year. Every single guy has a problem. And when you're trying to build a championship team and you want to go all in, you're not buying a Rico Dowdle who's losing into a timeshare. You're not buying a Hawkinson who has no quarterback. Like, these options were just slim pickings. So it felt like you had to really force the chips into the table, or you had to decide, okay, I'm going to sell at half value. And that's where a lot of people are not willing to do that in a dynasty league.
Yeah, I mean the half value was me for sure with Kyron. I still like beat myself up over that trade. Um, but yeah, I mean it is what it is. I still can't move on from it, but I did make that terrible trade. But yeah, to your point, like you said, there wasn't big guys down there that I mean, again, we're going to get into the deadline. The guys you traded for, I think, were all worth sending first for. But everyone else you just mentioned, I'm not, who wants to move any sort of big asset or a future pick for a guy that maybe contributes to your team in the playoffs. I don't know if you want to jump into the trade deadline now. But
Yeah,
like I
let's
said,
hit
we
it.
did have four. I think it was four trades that were worth mentioning.
Yeah, so if I loosely go back a
Most of
month,
them,
we can see that there are some big deals that were happening around the time where people had to decide whether they were going to contend or not. It looks like, yours slips into November here. So if you want to quickly give us a rundown of the ones on screen, and then I'll dive into what I was thinking at the deadline and what went down.
yeah. Trying to look in it. So mine that first one started because back then, honestly, I thought my team was like rebuilding. I didn't think I really had the roster to compete with the big dogs at the moment. So I traded away Kyron Williams for Will's second next year, which ends up being 204, and then your third. Definitely not the value that you want in return for Kyron. I
It
do
took
think
us a
he's like
week
starting
till
to lose
you
some of his.
sold too low.
Yeah, it's as soon literally the next day I was like, why? I woke up like, why did I make that trade? I honestly was ready to start texting people to push for a veto. I was like, what did I just do there? The next one we'll get into was honestly I think at the time he didn't mind it, but now I do think he's regretting it a little bit. Faye traded away Jordan Love, 2 seconds. Is that a first rounder and a third rounder for Jalen Hurts? Um, and Hurts had one or two good games for him in that stint. You just saw a terrible game out of him last week. And then I won't be surprised if Hurts isn't in Faye's starting lineup for week one of playoffs.
Agreed. I think he has good enough QBs, but I also think cuffing season won the trade in the moment. Just a hair. I thought it was good for both because Hertz has a better playoff push type of team setup. He can get touchdowns this year. Jordan Love was kind of middle of the pack, but I do think Love long term is a better quarterback. So I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up a better next year or the year after QB just in Dynasty in general. This next one
Yeah,
was a
I
swap.
I could see that.
So I go against Pharaoh in that week, and his team does look, especially now, like a dominant force. He went into that week. It was whichever of us won likely was going to take the lead in the division or second place to Faye. So it was fun. It was just a gamble. We'll see how it pays off in playoffs. This next one was Sean, who is our front runner, really trying to make sure that he managed a bye week situation. So I got Flacco, where I was actually excited that Flacco might have a good playoff schedule if Burrow didn't return. So that didn't hit for me, but I pick up a third. He picks up what was a pretty reliable average fantasy points guy, 20 to 23 for a couple of weeks there. And going into the playoffs, we'll see if he keeps that up.
Yep. Kobe Brissett, yeah, sneakily had a good season, but with Sean's two QBs, as long as they weren't on a bye, he wasn't playing him. And then this is where we start to get into the trade deadline. So the first one, nothing much. JCM, Faye gets a 2028 Cloutier third. Who knows how Cloutier's team will be by 2028? Nothing too big there, but this is where the trades start to pile in. We had four big trades. It was either three or four big trades, all right around deadline, which was awesome to see. So that first one there was between Sean and you. I'll say it, and then if you want to obviously give your thoughts right after, it was McCaffrey and his handcuff of Brian Robinson for Saquon, Tootin, Will's first, which resulted in being pick 104, Sean's first, and then Pharaoh's 2026 second. Those last two, we don't quite know the pick position yet.
Right. We expect those. Those are our bye teams going into playoffs. We expect those to be late, maybe 9 or 10 in those scenarios. But getting Tootin was an important piece for just having another shot at a running back that next year we don't know if ETN is going to re-sign. We don't know if Tootin will steal the backfield. But in general, if he's a second or a third round value, I'm happy to have him on my team. And then for Barkley, I'm looking at it as a year younger, potentially having a down year this year to lower his value, but I don't see them continuing to flake out on the offensive line. They had a good scheme a year ago, so I'm hopeful that next year he'll be something. And for the playoffs, he is a tier down, no doubt. Christian McCaffrey, 25 a game. Barkley, 15 a game if I'm getting 15 a game. So I know what I'm going into there is a sale.
Yeah, I was initially, I thought when the trade went through, I thought it was relatively fair. I thought Sean overpaid a little bit for McCaffrey, but it was all in pieces that I wouldn't mind overpaying in. I don't think Sean lost anything in that trade that, I would have been upset about. I think, like you said, you get a year younger with Barkley. I'm a little indifferent on Barkley. I don't know. I mean, that Philadelphia offense it just does not look that good. And then at the time, Will's pick looked like it was going to be later, and obviously Sean's with the bye, I figured it was going to be late. But with Will's pick turning into 104, that I think really swung things. And then for you, sorry, what was that? I missed the first part.
Did you think CMC was really on the move?
Yeah, I did. I thought I was telling Faye I thought for sure you were going to sell him. I knew he were going to get something good. I knew Sean wanted a running back. I liked what you got back. My only hesitation was that with how stacked Sean's team already is, I would have liked to seen Sean lose a little more. in his either his starting lineup or something, because I just think going forward his team is just a
We can look
powerhouse.
at it when we get to power rankings.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think either one of you lost the trade. I think you both got good pieces back. My only thing was like now Sean's team is just loaded at every
Yes.
position.
Going into the next deal, my mindset ultimately before I made any deal was, all right, what is everyone's priority and who can I help that's going to help me? I don't really care how my value of my roster went up at this point. I don't think that my team is a championship team. So, how can I make sure to set myself up for the future while also not dropping completely out of the playoff picture? So, having 2 weeks to do that and really going into the deadline with that goal, CMC going to the next hottest team would have been fun too. Zach was the other person who put in a really significant offer. I felt like for Zach, he was looking to push the chips in, and his only target was CMC on my team. So that put me in a bind of, all right, if that's your only option, let me see what the other deal is with Sean, and I have to take what's best. I'll lean a little bit toward the person who's not repeating, but I ended up going with Sean's offer partly for what you said. If it can take him down a notch long term, great, because right now it seems like every asset on his team booms. So in the next deal, it did seem like going into the deadline, Clue was at a bit of a crossroad of like, all right, I'm not actually going to contend. So what do I need to do? I also don't have a lot of assets on my team, so how can I increase asset number? When I talked to him, he said, I would need something in the early to mid second round, and he specifically called you out, kid. He said he wanted your pick.
I mean, I thought this trade was absolutely, yeah, I got to refrain from what I want to say, but like, I thought this was a terrible trade for Cloutier. I just don't see the upside in this trade. Like, you had 102 locked in. Like, I get it if he was another team that puts up points and, you're banking on, oh, maybe I beat me and Zalor the last 2 weeks. But there's a difference between Cloutier's team, who's like happy to put up 110, maybe 120, versus like a lot of other teams in the league. Like that's their base. But you give up 102 for now getting, oh man, what was it? Who's first? Zalor's first. Who now is in the playoffs. So at best, you're getting 105, and then you get my second. Like we haven't seen any mid second really turn out to be something when he could have gotten his pick of the wide receivers. Like there's three really good wide receivers coming out, maybe even four. And if Zalor goes to 106, you miss out on four wide receivers. I just did not see the upside in this trade at all. Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, so these two
You
were
can
tied
talk.
at
It's
the
going to take me
time.
2 seconds.
We ended up having Zalor was sitting at 5-7, Clue was sitting at 5-7, and their rosters were about what you see here. Going into that, I thought, all right, if I can secure a top four pick, I knew Clue was not going to be a playoff team. And he probably went into it thinking, all right, I'm not dropping too far, but I'm getting a mid second on top of that, which yours will be if you end up not in the playoffs. So as you look at the rosters, yeah, you can question his mentality there, but on this right side, he just needs more assets. When he goes and gets Kieran Williams from you in again one of your worst deals, and then you look at the rest of what he's got in the starting lineup. Those are bench guys. When you look at what's on his bench, those are drop guys minus the bye week. So for him to pick up maybe the next Rashi Rice, I could see why you might want a shot at it. But obviously, I did the deal because I wanted to secure one of those top four players.
Yeah, and I mean, I get maybe you get a Rasheed Rice, but no offense to Cloutier, like his pick history has not warranted like, oh, this is the risk reward in that just didn't make sense to me. Like I think 205 this past year was Trey Harris from the Chargers, who's like starting
Attaboy,
to
Trey.
like contribute to the team, but he's not going to be, he's not a guy that you want to throw in your starting lineup. I mean, he literally could have gotten, I'm at three, so I don't want to say who my number
Yeah,
one is
just
for a
tell me
wide
who you're
receiver right
taking.
behind you. But like he could have really secured a top wide receiver for his team that doesn't really have any good wide receivers. Like he's got JMO, but like I wouldn't feel confident in starting him. And now there's a chance where, I mean, if I lose to Faye, which most likely is going to happen, then he's getting pick 106, and the four wide receivers are gone.
Yeah. We're right in the mix there for 102, 103, 104. But really, for Zach, I think this deal made a lot of sense if you were trying to get Kamara for playoffs with a light schedule. I don't think you mind throwing in a second for that. And if he rides into next year and that offense improves, he could be something. So we can get into the next deal. Realistically, after this one, I felt like I had my draft capital set up well. I had 4 first rounders going into 26. I did not want that. My roster is a little clogged to have that many guys going in. So I knew I needed to do one more thing. And ultimately, if I can turn 5, 6, 8, I have 8 first rounders in the next 3 years into a star. That had been a priority all year. So if you look on the left, this is the squad. And I was really an Egbuka for Puka swap away from what you see on the left here. And some of these guys underperforming are out, but not really droppable outside of Keenan Allen. So I went in thinking, all right, how can I turn 5 picks into a star player? And I kept circling Puka, not only because the player, but because if I go through these teams on the left bar here, Sean, contender, doesn't really want to sell one of his better guys. Obviously, just made the CMC deal. Pharaoh, prices are high, also a contender. Faye, prices high, also a contender. Clue, nothing on his team except Drake May, who I did try to offer 4 or 5 firsts for. Story, that's who ended up making the deal with me. And then I have Cody, whose team doesn't have anything that's going to support this year. And while we've been good trade partners, it just nothing really matched. He was trying to offload some older guys as well. And then I almost can never make a deal with you because we have similar priorities. We're both getting into the playoffs here, and you just don't like firsts the way some people like first. So it wasn't like I was going to offer you, I don't know, a Trevor Lawrence and Garrett Wilson for a star. So it worked out from a priority standpoint, and here's the deal. So we go Egbuka and 3 firsts for Puka Nakua for our team that was 0 and 14 on the year.
Yeah, I like this for the both of you. I obviously like it more for you. I think, like you said, I was saying that to Faye. I was like, man, he's got, I think it was like at the time like 6 or 7 picks going into this coming rookie draft, and I was like, he doesn't even have 5 guys that I would like confidently drop. So you moving those 3 firsts in Igbuka for Puka, I thought it was a great trade. I'm also not high on Igbuka. Like most people, I thought he was way overhyped. And he's had 7 out of his last 8 games. He hasn't even scored 10 points. And then right off the rip, Puka joins you. What he dropped like 35 points or something.
Yeah, so
It
these are
was a
the
great
teams
move for you. I
before.
thought you won the trade deadline for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I feel like I went in with some priorities that got met, and that made me feel great about it. I do think, in general, I like to be a trader. So sometimes I feel like I'm selling things that could get me over the top, but I haven't really, over 4 or 5 years, felt like I'm that top tier contender the way, honestly, I would throw Pharaoh in there with Sean this year, but Sean specifically has been just the cream of the crop, and I haven't felt like I'm right there with him. So at some point, I got to go all in, all in. But this trade deadline definitely made me feel like I had a chance with picks 102, 104 in the next draft, keeping a 2027 first, and then having an opportunity with Puka and a couple guys possibly coming back from a down year this year, next year. So we'll see what happens in the playoffs, but I'm feeling good about it. You see, there's one more big deal on the table here. kind of a tier up, tier down, depending on how you look at it. The Lamar Jackson in a second goes to Will's team. He actually has a solid quarterback situation. And then the Daniels, Benson, Franklin package goes to Cody, who is definitely looking at next season after a couple guys just couldn't cut it. Obviously, we talked about J.J. McCarthy just ruining some fantasy seasons for receivers. So I thought it was a good deal. I do see where Will is probably sick of watching Daniels get hurt. I also see why Cody would try to get a little younger. So I thought it was great for both.
Yeah, I thought it worked out for the two of them. I liked Will's side a little bit better of tearing up for Lamar Jackson and snagging that second. But like you said, I think Cody, like, he gets a couple more roster pieces. He gets some youth on his team. Who knows how Benson's going to turn out. But I was going for Lamar too. I think obviously he didn't like my offer as much, and like mine was Purdy in a first for Lamar. Feeler, I would have been willing to add to it, and then my offer prior to right before the deadline, I would have taken Will's offer over mine as well, but I would have added to that as well. But yeah, I thought for both guys, I thought it was a pretty fair trade, but I would lean slightly towards Will.
Yeah, easy to say when a guy is also dealing with a dislocated elbow. So, we'll see how it plays out next year. But as we look at this, I think maybe we'll take a break before we get into our power rankings. It was great to catch up with everyone again, and I just want to make sure we give it the air it deserves.
Yes, sir. Always a pleasure.